one prior to that, so it was an aviation place. And I grew up wanting to be a pilot. I went through high school and didn't ruin my eyes through school and so forth, and it all worked out. So when you join the Navy to go into being a pilot, you go down to NAS Softly in Pensacola area, and you fly a T-34, and they still have T-34s around here. It's a Beach Bonanza with a straight tail on it. And then I went straight into basic jet flying in something called a T-2J Buckeye, which was a little jet trainer that actually built by North American in Columbus at the same place I used to visit as a kid to go over and see them building planes. so so that was the first thing. And then you go on to advanced flying, and basically in a basic jet, you just go out to learn how to fly around. And we did a little bit of gunnery, and we did carrier quals. So you did get your first carrier landings, first six, and then down to Beeville, Texas, which is south of Corpus Christi. And the F9F was a kind of a Korean War vintage plane, and we flew that. But mostly that was for instrument training. You got certified to be flying on instruments, got your license for being an all-weather pilot, and then we did six more carrier landings in an F9, and then we switched over to the advanced F111F, which was really cool because it was a afterburner supersonic. The Blue Angels flew that for a long time, and so we shot gunnery in that, just had fun, went supersonic and stuff like that, and then graduated, got your wings after that, and then you go fly whatever plane you're going to be flying in the fleet, and there's a training unit in our case out at NES Miramar, that's San Diego area, and I was one of the first group to go there when they opened up Miramar. I'm going to show you a picture of that now. Trying to. Oh, here we go. That show up?
Still looking at your bullet points there, Dick. There it is.
Okay, finally. So that's what an F8 Crusader looks like. Really great plane, and that's actually on the USS Midway. It's a static display down on the carrier that's at San Diego Bay, for everybody to go up and visit. So that was the first plane I flew. I flew it for a long, long time, and so then go to the fleet squadrons. I was in what's called VF 191, a famous squadron, and I went on 2 deployments on the USS Bonhomme Richard. And then after the first rotation from flying, this is all sea duty. You've been out and floating around the ocean and going around the world. And at this point, that's about 4 years in a squadron, something like that. And so you put about 5 years in for the training you took in flight training. You have obligated service, but it's only like 1 squadron tour worth, which is fun. And that's where the first time you have a chance to go to the airlines. A lot of folks did that. They got the good time training and all their licenses and so forth, and then they just went to fly with PSA, United, people like that. And some people went on to test pilot school. If you want to go into astronauts and things like that, you could put in for test pilot school. It's back in Patuxent River. And I didn't do that, but some folks did. And then they also send people to graduate school, and that's what they did for me. I went to UCSD, University of California in San Diego, and I was there for 4 years. And during that time, I was chosen as an astronaut. They called me up, and Alan Shepard was the guy in charge then. So I went down to Houston, went through all the tests, and went back to school. And they called me up, and Alan called me up and said I was selected and wanted me to join. And I said, well, I'll wait for another year because I'll finish up school by that time. And he said, well, fine, no problem. During that time, they had the Grissom fire on the launch pad down in Kennedy, and they never did hire any more astronauts during my time. So I kept on flying, and then after that, I went back to squadron flying, and I went to another squadron, VF-162, and I went there for another cruise. And let me see if I can get some pictures of that. Okay. See that one now?
Yeah, we see it, Dick.
That one?
Yeah, I see on the carrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what it looks like come back and land on the carrier. And the wings go up here. This is a kind of variable incident wing. So instead of having flaps that just come down, the whole wing goes up a bit because the fuselage is so long that it would drag the tail. And so I've got 660 carrier landings in my career, and like to do it a lot. And that's what it looks like, F8 coming back aboard. And that was a day, I was 3 combat tours over North Vietnam the whole time, over 100 combat missions, and I would fly a day mission and a night mission usually. And let me see, I've got another picture here.
Yep, see it.
Okay. So that's a night mission over Hanoi, taking off there, afterburners on. And when you turn up full power, when you're ready to go, you just turn on your lights, and then that's the signal to go ahead and launch, and off you go. And on the gauges, so you don't go in inverted or something like that. And then, like I said, I did 100 night landings in the Crusader, over 100, and which was tricky. And let's see, I think I've got one more picture to go. See that one?
Yep.
Yeah, that was me in my flight suit. We had dress flight suits and wore them quite a bit. Had 100 night trap cake there, the captain of the ship and the air wing commander. And I think that's about, well, there's one more. Marion, I know you're there. And she said, when they gave their talk, when Ross gave his talk, he had to take a picture of the pictures and then put them in some slides. And that might have been better for me. I thought I could do this quickly.
It's working out.
See that?
Yep.
So that was it. That was a MiG 21, a MiG, 21. Really good plane. That's what the Vietnamese flew. That was what I was up against. I enjoyed all that stuff. Okay. All right. So that's what that's like. And then I went back and was in another squadron. That's when the F-14s came in. I was the first commanding officer of that plane, helped put it all together, fleet introduction and so forth. Flew the first airplane from the factory back to Miramar, put on the first high-powered air demo. And that was a good time. Let me show that to you.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we see it.
I'm getting better here. I'm trainable. See that? Okay.
Clicks.
So that's the very first F-14 fleet plane. We had training planes. I was the number 30 pilot to fly an F-14. And we flew all the way from the factory on Long Island, actually to Dallas, refueled, and went direct to Miramar. And then one more shot. I think we're done with all this.
You have a lot of curly hair back then.
Well, we were the California fighter pilots, you know. Hair was a little bit longer then.
Yeah.
See that one?
Yeah.
So, but there's an interesting story with this plane. See that red, white, and blue stripe, the belly band on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Langley aircraft carrier was the very first aircraft carrier in the Navy, and the planes that were on it had a red, white, and blue rudder painted on the rudder so that they could identify with the ship. And the first squadron in the whole Navy on board ship was a VF2. And so when after World War II, VF2 was decommissioned, they were a big deal in the Marianas Turk shoot, all that. And so then when the F-14s came in, they recommissioned the squadron and had a commissioning ceremony, brought it back. And I sent one of the officers down to Jacksonville, Florida. They had them go down and talk to an old pilot that had been on VF2 in the squadron there, and he got the drawing on all their hangars and all their squadron patches and this and that, and how they really did things. So we recreated that whole thing along with the stripe and then the stars like this on the tail. And so that's how we got all that put back together and became the bounty hunters and carried on. And that the plane, that squadron still exists today. It's an F-18 squadron. And so it's maybe the oldest squadron, and obviously continuously, not continuously, but it's the oldest squadron from the beginning of time in the Navy. So then after this tour, being in a squadron and being a senior officer and so forth, some pilots then go to the airlines and some go to the test pilot route to commercial test pilots. And I had some people who were friends of mine who actually became pilots for the royal family in Saudi Arabia. They lived in London. They would get called up to go fly them somewhere. They'd take their Gulfstream 2 and go down and pick them up and take them somewhere else. I think they had bigger planes than Gulfstream 2. So there's two examples where early on after the first tour, you got enough time, you got all the tickets and everything, and you go straight into airlining, and then down the second time. And some of them went to be cargo pilots. I know Ross talked about that, but we had folks who went with UPS and people like that at that point, and then became private pilots for private companies and so forth. So then the rest of my story is nothing about all that. It was just I went into nuclear power, went to Vallejo to the shipyard up there, went to the ground school, and then I went up to Idaho and and went through the prototype training up there. Lived in Idaho and rode the buses out to the National Engineering Lab. 20, 30 degrees below zero, waiting for buses and things like that up there. Then I went to Rickover's training for people who are going into being a CEO of a ship, submarines and aircraft carriers. And you go through a lot of engineering training there and then an exam that's 3 days long and written and oral exams. And then you're a nuclear power engineer and you can go start up the ship anytime you want to, go through all the checks and you're in charge. So I got one more picture of that. See that?
Yep.
That's the Carl Vinson. I was the exec on number 2 command of Nimitz when it first got going. Went to Mediterranean for 2 cruises there. Then I went back and went in the shipyard and spent 2 years building this ship and took it on sea trials. And then after commissioning, I commanded it for about 18 more months and out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, turned it over to change of command and then went back. And instead of going on in the Navy, because I've been straight through without going into any shore duty, except for the graduate school. And then after that, I went into the tech world and went to Carnegie Mellon University, professor there for a while, spun off a company, and I'm out here in Silicon Valley. I'm executive chairman of a couple other companies out here. So I've kind of done all these kind of things, all based on having been in aviation and so forth, and knowing how to manage people and how to run the squadrons and things like that in ships. So my punchline is that if you're just starting out and you're looking at, how do I learn to go to fly and pay for all those bills and so forth and rummage around and bum rides and do training for other people, so things like that. That a good way to go is go ahead in the Navy and then they train you. Now you don't have to go be a fighter pilot or in another squadron, other kinds of planes that go aboard ship, because they do fly 737s that are surveillance planes and so forth, and then there's helicopters. So there are a lot of other things that are not quite as rigorous as going out like this all the time. But I chose to do that because I just liked it and stayed with it because it was fun and I liked the people and I had a good time and put me in good shape for doing all these other things. So with that, I'll close and take any questions. But that's what you do, and you don't have to be a pilot even to do some of these things. They have backseater systems operators and radar operators and so forth that have the same kind of a career path. And they actually can become commanding officers too, and captains of ships and so forth. So there's a regular career path for, if your eyes are not quite up to it, you can certainly ride the back seat of an F-18 or other planes like that. So
interesting, Dick. I got to ask you, what was the disappointment factor for you when you discovered they weren't going to bring you on as an astronaut? It sounds like the timing would have put you in the cycle for shuttle training in the late 60s, early 70s, given the way the program ended for Apollo and the Skylab and all that. It was already in the pipeline, so it would have been the space shuttle. Was that something that you were looking to do, or were you super disappointed, or what was your thought about that?
Well, we didn't know what was next. I mean, the only thing that was going on was the Apollo, moonshots. And I did a timeline calculating on what the whole thing was. I think I would have been on one of the later moonshots, actually. And
okay.
Couldn't do anything about it. So I was in grad school. I was enjoying that too. So and then I got recruited to, not recruited. I got ordered out of school to go fill in. I needed another tour aboard ship with me. I was XO of a squadron. That kind of worked out because I got done with that, and I got a whole tour deployed as an executive officer, as a fairly junior person, and came back. And normally you have to have an XO tour before you can be a CO, fleet up. So I went directly to the F-14 straight away. So I was only, when I commanded F-14s, I was only 33 years old, and kind of being in the Vietnam thing, I got promoted early a couple of times, and then by the time I got to aircraft carriers, I was in late 30s, 38, 39 when I started doing the Nimitz, and so I was early 40s when I was commanding officer of the Carl Vinson. So it just kind of worked out. So I got out with a little over 20 years of service that had all those things, and I really wanted to go into in tech work and so forth because I'd kind of been at sea enough over the years and never had shore duty. I was always in the wars or going out to stop them.
I was just curious too, in deploying a squadron of new aircraft. So you were the first F-14 Tomcat squadron. How much was already laid out in advance as far as the maintenance of them and all of the things that would make the squadron function properly on board ship? Or is that something you shake out yourself as the first squadron?
Well, we had to back up. There was a first in the Air Navy. They have the training squadrons that train in type. So when you go to a fleet squadron, say for F8, you go to the F8 training squadron, and there you go learn. You go through the regular syllabus of first time out and how you do this and how you do it, and through the advanced part of it, shooting missiles and dogfighting and all that. And then you're turned loose with those basic skills into the squadron. There you continue on to learn how to really do the whole thing while you're in a squadron, flying wing first for a year, and then you become a flight leader and so forth as you get more senior. So that did not exist. That training squadron did not exist for the F-14, and so that was my first job was the fleet introduction part. So for 2 years, I think, a year and a half, I was in charge of the flight training programs. I mean, you go to ground school first, and we had advanced media, which was way ahead. And then we had the best you could get on going in and learning how to what the systems are, how to do it, and flight simulators. All the gear you need to go pull engines and run the test engines on the test stands and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of things. It's called integrated logistics support. There's a whole package that all these systems are funded to go put all these things in places, all the test instruments and so forth, and supply and all that kind of stuff. So myself and there was a first commanding officer of that first training squadron. It's called VF-124, and then there was another first squadron with me, VF1 and VF2, and so the three skippers got together and we put together the whole thing. And when we got done, then of course we'd already gone through training ourselves. So when we went to our squadrons, and that's when I got the first plane from the factory and brought it out. I'd already been through the training and ready to go, and so all the squadron guys came through that same training just to get while they got the training squadron stood up. So, and during that time, we found the F-14 was so advanced that nobody had ever done the tactics for it. And so we had working groups to go figure out how to do it. We flew up to Area 51, tanked all the way up, and we flew against captured MiGs up there to kind of work out the tactics and so forth. A lot of cool things. And
did you lose any aircraft to the flat spin problem? Hank Scherf asks.
No, but you're talking about the F-14s?
I assume did they have a flat spin problem?
The early engines had compressor stalls, quiet stalls. And so I did have one squadron guy, the XO and VF2, had two engines flame out at the same time because the engine stalled out. He was, horsing around with it and got them started up and got back okay. but that was the only problem. We never had one spin out or anything like that. And the F8s could get loose and be violent and deadly if you weren't careful with them.
Well, what do you think about the F-18 replacing the F-14?
Well, the F-14 is a much better plane and all that. I mean, it was harder to maintain, and that was the reason. You know, there are, besides fighters on the plane, there are light bombers. You know, there's A7s, and then before that, the A4 Skyhawk, and of course the A6 Intruder. So those guys are the strike group. They're the ones who go drop bombs and things like that. And we escorted them. That's why I had all the flights, because we'd fly missions all the way up over North Vietnam to keep the MiGs away or chase the MiGs if they came out, things like that. And so those are always the Belmer pilots, and always make a little bit fun of them type of thing. And but they're great and good guys. And so then,
what was your favorite plane to fly?
Well, the F8 was really a nice plane. I mean, you put it on, you just wear it. It was a really flying machine, kind of thing. It felt good. And you just put it on, and when you wanted to do something, you just thought about it. I mean, you didn't even, it was just connected to your what you wanted to do. You didn't even think about it. F-14 was, real powerful, but it was more like just flying a big. I mean, you could climb away from an F8 in dogfight, and we just go climbing up. They couldn't even come up with you. So you didn't even realize how much more power you had. And at low altitude, you could go 450 knots, and you had enough ram recovery on the engines that you're over 1-to-1 thrust to weight. So you could pull and go straight up and just adjust the mirrors, and you could watch the world get small and just keep on going to up to 35,000 feet or so from sea level, just straight up, and be accelerating half the way up. So, but it was a great plane, but it was just different than flying something. You put it on, and you're part of the plane. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't care that much about that kind of aspect of it.
Did you continue flying after you left the Navy and you went into the tech world? Did you have a aircraft that you were flying in the civilian world?
I went out with my friends who had light planes, but I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's cloudy around there a lot of times. And I was never comfortable unless I could go out and fly enough, you know what I mean? And so, because we were always out in the clouds, and these guys would go out, and they didn't know what they're doing very much. And so I never got into it. It just wasn't that thrilling to me. After you've ridden the thunder and rode the big pipes, you kind of get spoiled to that. So I never got into it, and I was always busy doing other things. I got invited all the time. Let's go out and go fly, and I went a few times, but I just never caught on.
That's right. Your need for speed got out of your system.
Well, I think that was it. I still had the need for speed, and you couldn't get it.
Yeah, that's right. Mike Germano asked, does the F-14 Swing Wing configure itself automatically, or is it based on a speed config or pilot controlled?
The answer is 2. There's an automatic controller on it that will not allow the wings to go forward of what they have to be for what your speed you're going. So they'll go back automatically. If you don't touch anything, you just fly around, and they will position themselves. Anytime when you're flying, you can always push them way back, make it look cool. When you come in fast in a break, you always got them way back, even though you're not doing fast enough for it to be all the way back automatically. And so then when you come in, you brake, they'll come out automatically and go into full out when you're going downwind and ready to go land. You never touch that. But when you're going fast, you can never push the button to make them go out further forward than it's allowed. You can't overstress them that way.
Your friend Marion Harris had an interesting question. If you had your choice of currently deployed military aircraft to fly today, what would it be?
Well, an F-18, I mean, that's the fighter plane today, and it's a good plane. I mean, I worked on them. I did a maintenance system for them. I had a software company, and I started up in Pittsburgh and built was a chief architect on the system that's out there today. And so it's a great plane. It's just, to me, it's a little bit of a toy compared to something like F-14, where you really get up and go, and it's just a different thing to me.
So it would be the F-18 or nothing at all. What about the hypersonic aircraft that are coming up?
Well, I don't know anything about you said F-35. I mean, that's new. I haven't thought too much about it. It doesn't the current planes, and when I was around, you know, the F-18 would have been the one. That'd be fun. I mean, it's a good plane, no doubt about it, and gets the job done. It wasn't as exciting to me as F-8s and F-14s, that kind of thing. And hypersonic, I haven't paid attention to them actually. I mean, I see what in the magazines once in a while, but you're talking about you're talking about.
Well, yeah, any of the new aircraft, the F-22 or the F-35,
Oh,
they're not hypersonic, but supersonic.
Well, the F-22 is a good plane. I know that. I mean, it's a real fighter plane. Again, the F-35 is kind of a bomber plane, a strike plane, and got fighter capability, and you are just again flying all the automatic stuff, and they've got helmets now that link to the airplane. When you look around, on the missiles are trained to where you're looking and things like that. They got a lot of fancy things like that. So you get to be more like video games and things like that. I mean, back when I was doing is really, you know, more barnstorming in the sense that it was a basic airplane with big engine and a little cockpit and some stuff to go make it go fast, and it was fun, you know, kind of thing.
From the colleagues that you had in the Navy that, you know, went into the airlines, did you hear from them that they had any issue transitioning from fighter aircraft to large transport aircraft, or how did they work out that career change?
Well, they all did well. I mean, they just went there, and one guy got to be the chief pilot of U.S. Air, and lived in Pittsburgh, where it was headquartered at the time. So I saw him from time to time. We have reunions of these F-8 Crusader. It's kind of a cult. The guys that flew that, I had some French guys that flew it for a while in the French Navy, and they were as crazy as we were about it. So we still have the last Crusader ball every year, and go get together and tell lies and have fun, that type of thing.
Did you ever have to jump out of the aircraft?
Never did. I never had any accidents. A lot of near misses. A lot of things shot at me and things like that, and I shot a lot back things back at them, but I never had any real problems. Even after 100 night landings, and I had one time I hit down and caught the wire, and it bounced up, and there was a material failure, and the shock strut broke loose. So I settled back on one wing on the deck, and they just hauled it off, got it out of the way, and everybody carried on. We replaced the landing gear on the accumulator on one side, and it was good to go again. That was the biggest thing I ever had. Then I've had on test flights, I went out and did a lot of test flying because I was a maintenance officer too. And I've had oil not being proper in the constant speed drive, and it burned up and about caught fire on the plane, and made back with the fire lights going on if everything got back on the field okay. And it was totally toast after I got back, and they were amazed it got it back in one piece. So that was one of the only things I ever had that was interesting that way. And I used to do test flights. We'd go to on our deployments. We would send our planes up to maintenance at a place called Atsugi Base outside Tokyo. There's an old Jap Zero base. Really nice base. And they had an airplane company there, and they would take the planes and do corrosion control. And they would go in and clean all the wheel wells and everything, and take the corrosion and anything, clean everything up, and give a new paint job. It was like better than brand new. So we would rotate the planes through during our cruise and have them come back home nicer than when they went out. But I used to do test flights. Were interesting. I'd go out and go south of Tokyo Bay. And this is in a summer flight suit, no pressure suit, and this part being crazy that time in my life. And so the best altitude for going fast is 36,000 feet. That's where you have the thinnest air, but it's the coldest. I mean, thickest air and it's coldest, troposphere. So you got about 45,000 feet running full burner down and get to about 1.8 Mach and let it run out for a little bit. And then you just fairly slowly pull it up to 45 degrees so you don't bleed off speed. And then you just let it coast 45 up, and at 55,000 feet, you come out afterburner, and then you're flying the engine so you don't over temp it. And I would round out at 70,000 feet. I mean, it's like being in space because it was black up above and Earth was curving. You could see from Tokyo, you could see all the way to Russia, Vladivostok and places like that. So I did that several times to test the plane, see how fast it would go, how high it would go.
So you managed to get to the edge of space after all, even though you didn't.
I did. I did, yeah. So that was always interesting. So a lot of interesting stories, things I did.
Another quick question, I guess, and we'll begin wrapping it up. And that is, for night operations to be canceled, how rough does the water have to get for carrier operations to cancel your night landings?
Well, how to describe it?
I don't know if it's just the amount of pitching on the bow of the craft or of the aircraft carrier, or how is that determined?
Yeah, it's how much the deck is pitching, it's how much the deck is going up and down, because you're coming down the mirror that you're flying the meatball against green datum lights is stabilized. So from the back of the ship, if you're flying that, the ship is moving up and down, but you're on a steady thing, and you'd come in and the LSO you're talking to and watching you would judge when the deck was coming up right. And if your deck is way down and you're high, then you got waved off so you wouldn't hit really hard. But sometimes you'd be coming down, they say, keep it coming, and the deck was coming up, it would kind of snatch you out of the air kind of thing. So it's a matter of how much that stern is going up and down, how many feet, and whether or not the LSOs think they could get you aboard. And I don't know what range that was. I mean, but it could be pretty rough, and you still would go out and make it back.
Okay,
I got one.
Yeah.
I've got one. We're talking about that kind of stuff on the Carl Vinson. When we were getting ready to go on our first deployment to the Mediterranean and around Africa and up in the Persian Gulf, we were out in Virginia, Norfolk, and off in the Virginia Capes, and the wind was blowing really hard, like 50 knots, and you can only land the planes when they're about 35 knots. Otherwise, the downdraft and the roughness and everything like that, you'll have accidents. So I went back the ship down at 13 knots astern and held it in the stern going backwards. The Russians always had trawlers with us, and the trawler was going backwards with us. He was headed in the wrong direction, pointing in the wrong direction from our bow, but we were going back, and landed all the whole air wing on board okay. And then as we were about to finish up, a big tanker came over the horizon, and the rules of the road about what you can do, who's got the right of way, and all that kind of stuff was we had the right of way because they're flying airplanes, but it was pretty confusing probably, you know. And so that's, you're talking about how much can it go up and down. Then there's other thing is how much wind do you have or not enough wind. And
Right. Well, that brings up the question too that Bert was asking about rough weather. Obviously, if you're doing training missions or doing sorties for training, you don't want to unduly risk the squadron, but what if you've got thunderstorms? I mean, obviously you can go above and around them in flight, but if you've got them in the environment of the aircraft carrier, do you fly through those things? Do you not, does the ship move out of the way? How do you deal with rough weather down towards the surface of the sea? Like you've got a big thunderstorm going on. Do you fly in that kind of bad weather? Or is that just something totally avoided unless it's an actual combat sortie?
well, we have weather people live on the ship. I mean, they're real weather guys. I mean, that's their job. That's their rating. And so we're watching that all the time. The toughest thing to watch out, because you're flying in blue water. I mean, there's no fields to go to. When you launch going out in the middle of the ocean, you have to be ready to bring those planes back or send tankers up to keep everybody up until you can get them aboard and so forth. That gets to be kind of hairy from time to time. But um, the hardest part is dew point, because you can be flying, it looks great and everything like that, but you're always watching for fog to come. And I've been in situations where we're trying to get the flights in, trying to get the experience, trying to get the carrier landing practices and all that kind of stuff. It can go walks off. I mean, it can go fog on you in an instant sometimes. And so you've got to watch that all the time, because if you get a whole bunch of planes out there and all of a sudden you're in fog, I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere, you've got a lot of trouble. So we watch that probably more than thunder. You don't fly in thunderstorms. You can help it.
Right.
And I've flown in pretty bad weather, because the Russians would fly over and we'd have 5-minute alerts. We'd have to sit in the plane, and if they came around, you weren't allowed to have them find you and not be on their wing. So I've launched in some pretty heavy seas and managed to get back aboard. That snatch you out of the air. You come in and the deck is coming up, and then you make it, and
Right.
you're looking straight down at the water when you get caught by the wires.
Well, I guess
So-
we'll finish up with one quick question from Connor, and this sounds like maybe it's a trick question.
Okay.
First of all, why didn't any seaplane tender ships become museum ships? We have all these aircraft carriers and battleships out there. How come no seaplane tender ships? I don't know what the answer to that one would be.
Seaplane tender plane ships. I don't know. I think people like to go on. They like to go look at submarines. They like to go on aircraft carriers or destroyers, things like that.
They were all scrapped, I think.
Yeah, I think that was it. I think they look at it and see what is the appeal to the, like your place, the museum.
That's right.
There,
A lot of ships out there. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up right here. We've reached the end of our talk, and I'd like to thank our guest, Dick Martin, for his presentation. Please show your appreciation by going to your reactions feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen and give him a hand clap for giving us a little bit of an insight of being the first commanding officer of a squadron bringing out the F14 Tomcat. So
sorry I was so klutzy on doing the pictures, and Marion was right, and I owe her something good for warning me.
Not at all.
Sorry, you're going to be
it's
sorry.
Zoom. It doesn't really matter. So for the rest of us, I will look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks on Friday, November the 20th, as we continue our series on naval aviation with Paco Chirichi, with his behind the scenes on Speed and Angels, the real Top Gun. So until then, everyone, have a great week, couple of weeks, stay safe, and we'll see you at the next Hiller Talk.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
See y'all.